In the beginning, there was nothing, just darkness, no sound, no sonic, no audio. It was all dark and quiet, just like you see now. But then, 13.7 billion years ago, something happened. The Big Bang. The Big Bang resulted in creating Earth as we know it today. It created mankind as we know it today. Oh, and another thing. It created this man, Gene Cerwin, and I'm going to tell a little story about him. Why did we go from these type of speakers, HED, to these big box speakers? That's the big question, coming up soon. In 1948, Gene Cerwin started Vega Laboratories, which became Vega Associates. Then later on, he changed the name to Cerwin Vega. I promised you an explanation on the fact of changing their style from HED speakers to big box speakers. And why? Well, we can only speculate in why that happened. But we are so lucky to have an expert with us today. He has chosen to be unnamed or be nameless. He doesn't want his identity out there. But just for the record, we are going to call him Melvin. So without any further ado, I am giving the word over to Melvin himself to explain why HED became big box speakers. Here you go, Melvin.
Hi guys, today we're going to talk about the evolution of Cerwin Vega. It was really a big bang back in 1948. We can almost call it the second coming of the Big Bang that had the same impact as for 13.7 billion years ago. After 5 billion years of evolution, Earth had developed to what we know it to be today, and had created mankind. Well, one man came out early in the 20th century, and he emerged out of nowhere. No one knew where he came from. Maybe he came from the constellation of Vega, dropped down on Earth, and just created something really boom! Big speakers with a lot of energy, and probably energy he brought with him from the constellation of Vega and the planets up there. He built them so big and so powerful that everyone else was starting to shivering and basically shit their pants. And it was neutrons and electrons and energy and power fused into one, playing with the speed of light and the speed of sound, and really blasting people. Well, people got so afraid they couldn't deal with it. So in 1959, the whole trend shifted and the whole market shifted. People wanted smaller speakers because this out of Earth, out in the space type of sound that this man had created. And we're talking about Eugene Cerwin and Cerwin Vega as a company. What he did, he scared people shitless, and they wanted smaller speakers. Gene didn't want to be a part of that, so he opted out, and he started going pro, and he was building still the biggest and the meanest and the baddest and the loudest and the deepest speakers on Earth. And he was pounding people left and right, and they got beaten down, and everyone was shitting their pants, except for a few people that was running around rolling stones in the streets. They really loved this because they needed the power. And with Universe, universe always changes, and this ball of energy couldn't contain itself. So in 1970, it exploded again, and out of that ball and all that flame and explosion, there was a huge HED, and it got the name High Energy Design. And they created and they molded some really fancy, nice boxes with some speakers, and it sounded so good. And people started loving it, and they started embracing it again, and they couldn't get enough of it. It was like this energy, this high energy design was ruling the world. It had great veneered colors. It had a small compact design, but still very efficient and sensitive. It could produce a lot of sound and a lot of SPL. It could be heard at the moon and maybe even at the Vega constellation. And what Gene did was so fantastic. He created this series, relatively small boxes with a high energy, and you gave it just a few watts, and it created a lot of dB. And to understand SPL and dB and wattage, we have to look at the molecule construction of the DNA of sound. And by doing that, we opened up a few boxes of the HED, and we found this very, very free-flowing crossover part. There was some kind of a special electronic thing in there. And wow, the gods of thunders are speaking to us right now. So of course, there must be something going on. As we're making this video about high energy design speakers from Cerwin Vega, I can hear thunder outside. Okay, high energy design, designed to be pretty loud, but very little energy coming into it. It didn't need a lot, and you could see it on the specs. They were very moderate in specs. So how could they do this? Well, sensitivity and how they built up the boxes. They were very compact energy design boxes that projected the sound. And how people were reacting to it was, wow, I don't need more than 50, 60, 70 watts, and I can play loud, and I don't need to have my living room filled up with big boxes. And the design was, they had an inverted baffle on most models, which was very typical for the 70s. 70s was a very strange place when it came to interior architecture and interior design. It was almost kind of like you wanted things to sink into each other, and you wanted everything to be one united thing. So when you looked into a room, you couldn't see what was what. It was almost like it was camouflaged. And the high energy design speakers would build to kind of like merge into any room, living room, house that it was used in. It was not built to stand out, but it was built to integrate. And the sound really was the thing that stood out. Not many other hi-fi companies could do this. Cerwin Vega merged on to become a bigger company. They grew like crazy. It was like the second Big Bang, the third Big Bang or whatever. It exploded again. And Cerwin Vega became such a big name and such a big player in the universe of sound, acoustics, audio, sonic booms, sonic tweets, whatever. Well, they had tweets back then too. We have Twitter today, but they had Twitters back then too. So, something like that. But anyway, as the energy from the universe changed, Cerwin Vega also changed. They needed bigger boxes, bigger amplifiers, bigger drivers to create another Big Bang. And they did. And they just built it so bad. I'm not meaning bad, but good bad. That it blew people away again. But not as big as it was back in the 50s. The cabinets were smaller, but they still had the big bang of a sound. And the energy that came from them was almost enough to light up a whole city. And you could see electrons and neutrons and everything just merging. And it was like you were sitting there with a sonic, almost like a sonic orgasm going on while the stars was blinking and the thunder was outside there, and it was really, really cool. So why this change from the small high energy design cabinets to the bigger ones? Well, trends. It's all about trends, people. You know, the universe kind of like drives everything, and even if you like it or not, the universe kind of like, in a way, tells us how we want things and how we react to things. And universe is the thing that gives us all this. And you know, as you know, universe is infinite, and so is sound. Once you play a tune, it is infinite. You hear it, and then it just you remember it, so it's still there. So all this thing that people have been asking is, why scientifically, why did Cerwin Vega change from the small HED line of speakers to the big box speakers that we had back down there, and we had a smaller one up there? Why did it change? Well, like I said, trends. It's all about trends, people. And they, of course, they want to develop a better product, but it's all about trends. And it's all about ideas and philosophy. And you see, in the 70s, there were not a lot of people working at Cerwin Vega, so all speakers were designed and created by maybe one or two people. But in the 80s and 90s, you know, you had 300 people plus working there, and you had a lot of designers, a lot of engineers, and all of these had great ideas on how they were going to build and design things. So there was not like the D series that came in '84, which was the first big speaker. It was designed by one person or two. It was always like a team, but the next speakers were then designed by another team, and so on and so on. So that's why things changed. That's why we went from the HED line to the bigger ones. Trends and people. People. So with that in mind, I think I just answered why it changed from small HED line speakers to the big boxes. Trends, people, design, and of course the universe itself. So there we go.